Welcome to Autocracy with FP Wellman. I am Fred Wellman, your host. If you're in the wrong place, stay. Have a good time. Grab a beer. It's all good. It's Friday night. We've got another great show and a guest I'm excited to share with you. But clearly, the news out there is crazy right now. And look, I don't know if you saw the show a couple weeks ago. We were joking with Christopher Titus, the comedian, that trying to write a script, shoot a show, and get it up before the news overwhelms you is virtually impossible. You're not shooting live. And I think I've actually had live events go awry when the news come out. I was on a Zoom when Trump got indicted, for God's sake. Having said that, a lot of people are saying that, obviously the biggest news is about the indictment and, of course, the arraignment this week. There's a lot going on there. But a lot of folks, a lot of professionals with air quotes I'm doing, if those listening at home, are saying this indictment actually strengthens his support in the Republican Party and the general election. Now, we can agree to disagree in that assessment. We're starting to get some surveys and some polls that give windows in these things. This weekend saw the first trickling of clues. And as always, what you see depends on where you sit, right? So a CBS News YouGov poll taken just at the indictment shows that while the overwhelming majority of Americans see a national security risk with the information that's available in that indictment and the documents that Trump was leaving unsecured and stashing, likely Republican voters see politics. 76% of likely GOP voters say the indictment is politically motivated, and just 12% think the documents he kept in his ugly-ass club bathroom were a national security risk. But this is where it gets interesting for me, and this is a great poll, and I'll link to this article on our Substack. But when asked if it was a national security risk of Trump keeping nuclear and military documents, 38% of likely Republican voters said yes, where a whopping 80% of the rest of the country, like us normies, said it absolutely was, right? Which is a hell of a split, okay? So only 38% is a number for Republicans too. Now, Trump is currently polling at 61% among likely Republican primary voters, with DeSantis trailing at an anorexic 23%. Though he remains in contention. There's others. Well, there's like 6 different questions in this poll, and I'll send you the article, but it's really very interesting. But this is very little change, okay? Since the opening days of the campaign, I think we did a bit on Midas Touch about how DeSantis' number actually took a fall. It's pretty amazing to launch a presidential campaign and do so badly your numbers went down. But that's Ron DeSantis. The better you get to know him, the less you like him. So, and having said all that, it does not necessarily make him a stronger candidate, but it hasn't hurt him that much of this base. But once again, is his base big enough? And I'm not convinced they are, right? Look, as we've said before here, we peeled off the coalition that opposed Donald Trump in 2020, peeled off 4 to 6% of Republican voters that voted for him the first time, the normie Republicans. I just don't see them coming back to a guy with 70 plus federal charges against him, or criminal charges. Anyway, fascinating day as always to start the show off, but man, have I got a great guest talking about bigger things. Again, the show is called On Democracy, and this guest is one I've want to have on for a while because On Democracy is his damn thing. So without that, we've talked a lot. Let's get on with the show. Matt, throw the music. All right. Good music, good rock. I love the energy. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is On Democracy with me, FP Wellman. I was looking at old clips, and you know what? It appears I start every show off saying how excited I am for this week's show. And I am. Matt, don't be nodding back there. I see you. Matt's nodding. I do. I say I'm excited every week. Don't criticize. But I do, because I have great guests every week. I do this show to talk to cool people. I got cool people. And by the way, Matt, I don't know if you know this. This week is our second month on the Midas Touch Network. Marks 2 months. This is our 8th show. I don't keep track anymore, but we've been on the Midas Touch Network for 2 months now. Well over 7 million views of all of our. My God, I love this community. I love being a part of the Midas Touch Network. My friends, the brothers. Anyway, it is exciting. So with that, I got a great guest. So David Pepper is a lawyer, accomplished author, political activist, former elected official. He teaches election law and voting rights. Served as the chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party between 2015 and 2021. I love this bit, though, David. During law school, he was named most likely to be president of the Cincinnati Board of Tourism. And where, by the way, he actually ended up serving on their city council. Obviously, they got you right on that one. But really, we're here today because his acclaimed books, Laboratories of Autocracy, and his new one, which we'll throw on the screen, Saving Democracy, A User's Manual, detail the risk of anti-democratic statehouses posed to our democracy. Now, you've probably seen his popular whiteboard talks on social media, on Twitter. He explains the machinations of those who oppose democracy and how we can push back. And if you haven't, you just really need to. And we'll put out his Twitter handle at the end here. I had the honor to work with him on a really cool project I'm sure you'll hear about later in the show. With that, David, man, brother, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you here, man.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. Congrats on your anniversary here, a couple months in at least.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's going great. No surprise, but I love the audience too, and I'm so glad you're part of it.
Me too. I tell you, I just love. I worked with the brothers during the campaign, and we did their podcast. They did mine. We hung out a lot, and I love the community they've built. So it's just such a privilege to be part of the Modest Touch Network. You'll see. I joke on the show a lot that I'm sure you can actually read the comments on this show. It's
Awesome.
So make sure you do, and folks, remember to comment and say hi. I am reading them. I'm got crushing self-esteem issues. I read your comments. Hey, having said that, now I just as we're getting ready to tape, you did I caught one more of your new whiteboard videos, and you talk about. Well, actually, it goes right to what I talked to at the top of the show, David. It talks about the prosecution of Trump and the insane GOP primary. And it's going to take a lot of our attention, right? It's going to take a lot of our time. But that's not the fight, is it? I mean, you make a pretty good point. What's your take on that?
My take is these things are really important.
Yeah.
We need Trump to be held accountable for breaking the law.
Yeah.
The primary is going to be what it is in the GOP side, but the trap of this very high voltage coverage of all that is that we all sit around and watch it, and we think that's where democracy is being determined. And if you go back to my original book, Laboratories of Autocracy, the new one, the truth is the front line attack on democracy is not the GOP primary. And it's not the prosecution of Trump.
Right.
It's that gerrymandered state house all over this country that is attacking voting rights, gerrymandering, passing extremist bills. And that's the bad news.
Right.
The good news is because it's in those state houses and not in some swing state somewhere or not in D.C., and it's not only Jack Smith's DOJ, where you can't do anything anyway, where it's being attacked, there are also numerous opportunities for every single listener, every single viewer to make a difference fighting back. So rather than just watching the things that we have little we can do about that have less in the end role in shaping democracy, look at where democracy is truly being undermined and know that there's actually work you can be doing right now all the way through the next year to fight back. If we do that work well, not only could maybe Trump be in the end charged and sentenced, and not only do we have some primary happen, but we also save democracy in the process. If we sit back and watch these other things and don't engage where the front line of democracy is, we lose. To put it differently, do you think Steve Bannon is stopping his work to watch the Trump trial? No. Do you think he's stopping recruiting election deniers to be election observers while the GOP primary plays out? Of course not. Just like the Ohio Republicans aren't stopping their attack on the Ohio Constitution. If they're not stopping, because that's their front line, we can't stop either. And so that whiteboard walks through that reality. And then this book we're going to talk about tells you all the things you could actually be doing right now, all the time, to lift democracy wherever you happen to live in America or overseas for that matter.
I love it. And that's something we talk about a lot in the show. And of course, our audience talks a lot about is what can I do? Put me in, coach. Where can I do that? And what you just described is all local things. It's not happening in Washington. It's not happening. It's happening in Ohio. I mean, Ohio, like you said, it's an election in August, right? That they're trying to peel back the number of people it takes to pass a constitutional amendment. It's remarkable the work they're trying to do to try and sneak them in. Just like we just saw in Kansas, what was a year ago, where they tried to sneak through the abortion amendment by putting it on the ballot during the primary in the summer. That's what these clever things they do. So we do have to be on guard all the time. And that does take us to the book. You wrote, the new book, Saving Democracy, User's Manual. What drove you to that? And tell us more about what we can find in your book.
Sure. So what drove me to it was I wrote a first book, and I was really excited that one of the first interviews I did was with the Midas brothers, the whole network, and it really was a shot in the arm. Yeah, you guys gave me a great introduction. But that book was basically saying, don't just watch, like we just said, don't just watch Marjorie Taylor Greene or George Santos or Trump. There are hundreds of people just like them that we never have heard of in your state house or another state house. Normally, they don't even face opposition come re-election time. And they're the ones destroying democracy far more than whatever Marjorie Taylor Greene says tomorrow on Twitter or whatever.
Right.
And that's their front line. And that's where they've been on offense, where we haven't even playing defense for too long. Right. We literally are letting it happen while we focus on a few swing states in a federal election year. And so the point of that book was to say they are operating as laboratories of autocracy. That's where the attack is. Let's engage there. Now, people liked the book. I was excited to get good feedback. But like you, I read all the comments, okay? And I started to get emails from people saying, oh my God, because the first book goes through in great, painful detail how bad it is on the ground in a state like Ohio, how painful the corruption looks, how the results are so bad in these gerrymandered, hijacked states. Yeah. People would say to me, David, I love the book, but it was so painful to read, I had to keep skipping to the end to understand what I could do about it because I'm so frustrated about what you're describing. So basically, that compelled me to write a book that skips to the end. So this book basically say, okay, if you want to read all the dark reality of what's happening in these gerrymandered, unaccountable, extremist state houses where their front line, the Koch brothers' front line, attack democracy exists, there's a great book. It's called Laboratories, Autocracy. But once you understand that reality, and we better understand it because it's why we're losing. Yeah. Once you understand that reality, then here's every specific thing you can do to fight back. And what I've observed since I wrote the second book is that narrative that we have told ourselves that everything's about a certain number of swing federal elections, mainly senator. It's disempowering to the average person because they don't live in one of those places. Right. They're in a blue state where everything's, they're going to win, or they're in a red state where they're going to lose. And so they think, well, I hope John Fetterman wins, or I hope Warnock wins, but I'm stuck. I can't do anything about it. So it's it's not only a false narrative because democracy is under attack everywhere. It's a disempowering narrative because it makes people think there's nothing they can do. Once you realize that the battle for democracy is in Tennessee and those uncontested races, it's at your school board where they want to ban books. It's, it's in the Ohio where they want to disenfranchise voters.
Yep.
The good news from that bad news is there's so much you can do wherever you are. Right. And I walk through the book, case studies, organizations, individuals just like you who decided to step up and run in a race that had never been contested in years, for example. And I start to show the difference that people doing these things can make. And it's not all that different from what anyone listening to this could be doing as well. And my guess is a lot of them already are. But whether it's taking on book banning and censorship, or making sure we're re-engaging voters that have been disenfranchised wherever we live, or making sure that if you're in a red state that's had dozens of uncontested races for too long, which fuels extremism, we all decide no more. We're not going to do that anymore. Or it's start investing your money that you spend into nonprofits and businesses that are lifting democracy. No more spending money with people that are sinking democracy. Figure out who they are, spend accordingly. So it goes through all these, it's trying to be a user's manual, hopefully kind of like your show, a little spicy to read so you'll get through it. But in the end, this is saying to anyone, if you care about this stuff, don't just watch and listen in frustration. Also, use your energy to lift democracy, and there's so much we could all do, frankly, far more than any of us are doing now. And it's not that hard either. A lot of it is just incorporating a pro-democracy mindset into things we already do every day, but just add democracy to what those things are.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. And that's exactly because I get the same questions, right, all the time. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I give examples. Here in Missouri, where we had recent school board races, the Moms for Liberty folks are pushing pretty hard. They had their slate of candidates, and we came up with their opponents. I was really proud of them. And the local groups came together and created their own slate of candidates, because these are all open seats. 12 people run, top 3 win. And they actually ran a slate of actual real parents. First of all, I love that part. And the people who aren't book banners and aren't going to get involved in curriculum. And I was real proud to see here in West St. Louis County that slate of 3 won and defeated the Moms for Liberty candidates and everybody else. So there is hopeful
it's happening
signs.
All over. Right. The book banning is really unpopular.
Right.
And if you run hard against it, or at the decision point of that school board, if you're the ones who show up to that meeting and say 70% of us in this community do not want the angry parent down the street telling our kids what they cannot read, that's not for them to decide. Normally, the crowd showing up for sort of a freedom to learn type of frame are winning the arguments, whether it be school board races or school board meetings.
Yeah.
But just a great example of how you can, the activity of doing it is important either way, but you can very often win that battle.
Yeah, just by being present. I stumbled on this years ago when I first got involved in local politics back in, Peachtree City, Georgia, which I shouldn't say that way because it's a very snooty town. And in Peachtree City, I started going to city council meetings, and I learned. I was like, holy cow, there's a lot going on. I had to run for city council and the mayor until they threw a war. And, you know, it's the same thing. You get involved, and okay, now I see the system, how it works, how much it has an impact on your life. They're just people, I just can't imagine how many people don't realize how impactful your school boards and your city councils really are on your day-to-day life, much more so than Congress. That's the funny part. As much energy we expend on Congress, your life is controlled locally by those guys, right? The taxes you pay more often than not has nothing to do with any of those people. It has to do with your local school boards.
And the same things with State House. So those are districts, they rarely hear from people.
Yeah.
So when you do show up, you actually get noticed. Right. Unlike Congress, where you're just a number on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
If you make that call, there are 2 staff members in that State House office, and they're picking up the phone and they're going to listen to what you say. So think of that as local as well. Most of these districts, like in Missouri, are quite small.
Oh yeah, Missouri has one of the largest legislatures in the country.
Yeah,
right?
you guys are huge.
I think it's like
but that also means your voice matters there.
Right.
And what do the Koch brothers? Why have they taken advantage of state houses for years? Because they've sensed that no one's paying attention there.
Yeah.
And no one stands up to nonsense there. So they become the perfect places to run through extremist stuff. Well, if we all start paying attention and making noise in these places, all of a sudden it's a much less easy place for legislators to pass crazy stuff. So all that activity, whether you're running, encouraging others to run, or simply advocating, all that makes a difference to what is a model of governing right now that they are dominating because they're in all these places that we haven't been for too long.
Well, presence matters. We learned that in combat, right? I mean, I learned that as a soldier. That's why we did presence patrols. That's why we make sure we went out. We got our soldiers out of our vehicles and walked on the street. Being present matters, right? And being present at a school board meeting, being present at your state legislature, testifying, calling, writing, it does matter. Like you said, I think a Missouri State District is 30,000 people. It's barely a town, right? So you can really make a huge impact and have your voice heard. It's really, I couldn't agree more. You know, one of the longtime listeners and the viewers of the show know I'm obsessed with uncontested and undercontested races. You know, last cycle nationally, there were 23 unopposed Republican congressional candidates. Shocking 126 Democratic opponents never raised enough money to even put up a competitive fight. It's scientific research says about $200,000 to run a congressional race. 149 races basically were uncontested. Now, you've been in this fight at the state level for years. I know you're with Blue Ohio and all. You know, talk to me why can you expand on why contesting these races matters? Like why does it matter that they're uncontested, and what's the impact of that?
So it's truly a crisis that gerrymandering's terrible. So I want to make that clear to start. Of course, that's one reason people aren't running. They think, well, it's so gerrymandered, why bother? Not running is far worse than simply gerrymandering. Think about it for a second. One, you never know where you're going to win unless you're on the ballot.
Right.
And so look at Kansas in last August.
Right.
These state houses have gotten so extreme. They actually are defending things that are very unpopular in their own states. Yeah. Sometimes they're also enmeshed in corruption. Yeah. And other problems. Sometimes their outcomes are terrible, like 4 days of school a week, which is happening in a lot of states. Yep. Well, if you don't run, you deprive yourself of the opportunity to win, because their records are reaching a point where you could actually beat some of these people. But let's remove the chance of winning for a second, because obviously that's the ultimate goal in these races. Yeah. Running and losing is so much more important than not running at all. Because think about these places, and I'll go through the numbers. 50% of those Tennessee Republicans who kicked out those 2 state reps, the 2 Justins, did not have an opponent last November. 50%. Wow. The author of the abortion bans in Mississippi that led to Dobbs, Texas that led to that crazy law where you could start suing people, Ohio that led to that Indiana, that 10-year-old rape victim having to go to Indiana. Those 3, none of them faced an opponent in their next election. Wow. They turned the country upside down with their toxic laws, but in their own district, they don't even get challenged. Wow. You start to add all that up, and that is why the extremism is so bad. Yeah. And you know this from your own politics, if you don't face an election in the general at all, in Texas, they literally call it canceled. If your election is canceled, then every incentive in your path in politics is to be an extremist. Yeah. Because you only worry about a primary. You never worry about accountability in general election, which means you never worry about a threat from the middle. You only worry about a threat from the far right. And so basically by not running, we are incentivizing extremism, and we're taking away any incentive these people feel to actually be more reasonable. For example, those 50% of Republicans in Tennessee, to vote to keep the two Justins would have been a risk for them, because that's how they worry about a primary, right?
Right.
Oh, you voted with Democrats to keep them. We don't like you. You're a rhino. You're gone. So they're rewarded in their political system by being extremists and voting like that. And if we start running against people, again, even in tough races, we start to bend the curve the other way, that there's accountability they face more from the middle than just from one side. The other thing is, it's not only accountability, it's also basic transparency. The crisis of our state houses, the reason the Koch brothers and ALEC, that one national organization, love state houses, is no one knows what these places do.
Right.
They can't even name their state rep. Well, what's the one moment in time where people focus on a body of government? An election.
Right.
If you're not even knocking on doors or sending a flyer or going to the forum or the debate to discuss that crazy incumbent's views and agenda and legislative record, no one's ever going to hear about it.
Right.
And so that's why we have an entire world. And here's how bad the numbers are. More than half of the Oklahoma Republican reps, no opponent last election. In many states like Texas and Georgia, I think it's 30 to 40%. Tennessee over 50. You add it up, we're talking about tens and tens of millions of voters last November who showed up to vote at the level of politics that determines our democracy, state houses, more than Congress.
Yeah.
No choice whatsoever. That also means tens of millions of people who didn't even have a conversation in their community about what a state house even does.
Right.
And so when you project that out over a long game, as opposed to just a cycle by cycle game, you realize why the extremism is getting so much worse. We've abandoned millions of Americans all over this country to one side ruling, and that side only faces an incentive to be more of an extremist. And that's why I would say running to win is great, but we all, you and I, and this infrastructure we have to build, we have to start reframing running. In a world where democracy is under attack, in a world where, extremism is exploding, running itself is public service. Yeah. Standing up and knocking on doors and saying, here's what your crazy neighbor, the state rep, has been doing. You didn't know it, but now you do. That is part of getting some accountability and normalcy back into politics that in too many places just doesn't have it. And that's why it's such an important thing to no longer accept as business as usual, leaving so many uncontested races. That's fueling the extremism. Running everywhere starts bending it back the other way.
And I think we do it ourselves. I mean, I think when I say I'm Democrats or those who oppose this, we pick the flippable, winnable races, right? So it's always about the flippable, winnable. And I've already seen people declare this election, well, there's 18 races, that's it. Just put your mind on those 18 races, like, holy shit, there's millions of Americans who are just being ignored, and they hear you already. We're sending a loud and clear, when we declare that only a couple of races matter, we're telling millions of Americans, you don't. Right.
Absolutely.
That's the message, isn't it?
And the other party is right there. The other party is talking to them. They're at the local, county fair with the booth. And so, it reinforces it. Now, again, is it easy to run in these places? No,
it's terrible.
I'm not. And that's why when we have people who do, rather than looking the other way because they're not somehow going to flip a state blue next year.
Right.
Rather than looking the other way, we should say to them, my God, thank you for running. You're a champion. You're a hero. You're stepping up in a tough place, and we surround you with support because of it. Now, you're not going to get as much as a U.S. Senate candidate, but we're going to show you enough respect and gratitude and respect what you're doing enough to show that we value what you're doing. Right now, we are sending a message in too many places that we simply don't value people running at all. And by the way, you've probably seen this.
Oh, what a great point.
At the end of a race where for 6 months you were reminded every day that your race in that seat was not valued, you will not run again. And if your friend in the district says, hey, I'm thinking about running, should I? You'll say, hell no, they don't care. You'll get no support. Why run? And that's why we have all these uncontested races everywhere. People think, well, they don't care if I run. There's no value based, that no one sees a value in it. Why would I ever do that to myself? We have to build, and this is Blue Ohio, the things that we're trying to build together down the road. We need to build an infrastructure that says to everyone, oh, we do value running everywhere. We value it so much. We thank you. We support you. And even if you don't win, we keep thanking you. And if you were good at it, we want you to do it again.
Yep.
We have to change that. And the reason we don't value it right now is because everything in our life is about a few high-profile celebrity races for a few swing seats. Yeah. And we want to win those seats. But that's not everything. In fact, if the attack on democracy is grounded in statehouses, you can win those swing seats for the federal level and still lose the battle for democracy, which is what's happening. So we have to say, well, it's no longer acceptable to allow all these seats to just go uncontested. That is not business as usual. We can't let it be that. And that means we have to make adjustments in how we frame these races, how we support them, so that all of a sudden we're on offense, running everywhere, on message. And you'll know this from Missouri. The good news is not only are the people that we would be running against defending records of being total extremists, often out of touch with their own districts. For the most part, these state houses, and I know you're living this here in Missouri, like I'm in Ohio,
yep.
The results of these places are terrible.
Yeah.
I don't care whether it's student debt that's being built up on the backs of these young people, yep. Public schools cratering, no infrastructure, small towns dying. On their watch, they cannot defend their records. But if we don't run against them, we can't ever point that out. If I was in a rural district, I would spend half my time talking about the fact that the rural schools, the center of these communities, are falling apart. A lot of these towns are dying. It's not because of a caravan from Mexico. No. It's because of your corrupted state house. Yep. And run really hard on that. And you may or may not win, but you'll start to get some people listening if you're connecting it back to the issues that are frustrating your neighbors and friends. And those issues in almost every state that they have hijacked through this intense gerrymandering. Yeah. Almost every state, I will show you results that they cannot defend.
We had John Nichols on the show a couple weeks ago from Wisconsin, and he talked about the Supreme Court race there, and what Judge Jan Petusiak did very well was she ran ads on rural radio on the hit, because totally. I know Ohio's the same way as Missouri, that rural radio matters still, and she ran.
It's ads. A great buy too.
It's a cheap buy.
A lot of money. You can blitz the play. I love rural radio.
Blitz it. Yeah. So but tell them, hey, look, it isn't the 4 kids who play sports. It is not the 4 transgender kids in the history of our state that are playing sports that's destroying this country. It's a state. It is the fact that our downtowns, go downtown right now. What do you see in downtown, fill in the blank? Nothing, because that's what we've gotten from our state house. I mean, you can make the case very.
And by the way, in some places, you don't have school on Fridays anymore.
Right, because they
what do you do with that? Or you're paying $500 for Joey to play football when you didn't 4 years ago because they defunded everything. Yeah. So there are real issues, and what's so good about those issues. By the way, why do we have a Democratic governor of Kansas? She ran only on schools for a year. She won. She's now in her second term.
Yep.
I don't care where you are, but especially in rural parts of this country, that school is the center of the entire community. And if that school disintegrates, the center of that community disintegrates with it. And so I think there are really potent issues that people around their kitchen tables are talking about. The Republicans know it.
Yeah.
They're still doing it because some private player is paying them to do that up in their state house.
Yeah.
But you can go right in there and grab those voters if you're talking about the right way, because you'll be tapping into their frustrations about the fact that they got to figure out what to do every Friday because they don't have school anymore that obviously has their kids occupied.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to pause. We got some incredible sponsors of the show this week, so we'll let them say hi for a minute. As you know, I have a big family, and that means there's usually a lot of garbage left over by the end of the week. And frankly, I used to feel really guilty about it, but then I got a Lomi. Now that I have a Lomi, it's changed the way I think about my food waste. Lomi transforms my garbage into gold at the push of a button. Lomi is a countertop electronic composter that turns food scraps into dirt in under 4 hours. Now I love composting. Plus, it's made cooking at home even more fun. There's no food rotting in my garbage smelling up the kitchen. Thanks to Lomi, I only have to take out the trash like once a week, and it's hassle-free, mess-free, no more leaking bags. So here's something cool too. I turn my waste into nutrient-rich dirt that I can feed to my plants, my lawn, and my big garden in my backyard. That means it's not going to landfills and producing methane gas. I get to help the environment, and that makes my life easier. All my food scraps, plant clippings, and even those leftovers I forgot in the back of the fridge go back into my garden. Help me grow more nutritious food right in my backyard. I learned recently that food waste makes up a huge portion of our personal carbon footprint. So by reducing the amount of food I send to the landfill, I'm helping to do my part for the planet while also feeding my garden. So whether you want to start making a positive environmental impact or just grow a beautiful garden like mine, Lomi is perfect for you. So head to lomi.com/Fred and use the promo code FRED to get $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/Fred and use promo code FRED at checkout. Thank you, Lomi, for sponsoring this episode of the show. Do you know your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold like I do often, I really recommend you try out Miracle Made sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep the perfect temperature all night long. Now, that silver-infused fabric means that Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long so you get a better night's sleep. And I can tell you, honestly, I have. Now, the silver fusion technology also adds an extra benefit. It means the sheets prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than normal sheets. There's no more gross odors from your sheets. You don't have to worry about any problems with bacteria. They just last longer. Now, I've been sleeping with these sheets, and they're seriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and they feel as nice, if not nicer, than the bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria clogs your pores, causes breakouts and acne, a whole bunch of problems. Sleep better, sleep clean with Miracle. Now, go try miracle.com/Fred. That's go to trymiracle.com/Fred to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use that promo code FRED at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. So Miracle Made is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Now, upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Fred and use the code FRED to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Fred. Treat yourself. I love the products. I've been using them myself and sleeping like a baby. So one of the things you and I both agree on, I think, David, is that in the end, the problem isn't necessarily flipping Republicans or supposed independents, right? It's disengaged voters, right? It's people who are eligible to vote but have simply dropped out of the process or never joined, right? How do we get them in the fight on our side? How do we engage Americans? I mean, I know it's a big part of your book and your life, you know. Yeah. So talk to me about disengaged voters.
I'll just give an example. More than J.D. Vance won Ohio with 25% of the vote.
Jesus.
You know, more than half of the people didn't vote, and he beat Tim Ryan by a little bit. That shows you the massive opportunity if we re-engage voters.
Yeah.
If someone has decided that voting doesn't matter to them, or if they've seen Ron DeSantis arrest voters who are doing something wrong, so they worry. Let's say they served in time in jail for a couple of years. They've been out for 10 years, but they don't know the rules. So they hear about a voter ID. They see the Ron DeSantis. They're worried that if they vote, they may get in trouble if they've done something wrong. So they don't vote. Or if they decide that, well, I was excited about Obama, no one's ever excited me since, or they've been suppressed, whatever it is. The way you don't get them back engaged is to frantically knock on the door with 1 week to go saying, don't forget to vote, which is kind of what we do.
Right.
This is, as Stacey Abrams said, these are people that it's a persuasion message. It's not persuade you to be a Democrat. It's persuading you that voting actually is something you should do.
Right.
And if you haven't done that in a while, that's not just the transactional nature of a frantic knock on the door with a reminder to vote. And that's where I go through. And the more, when you write a book, you kind of are always thinking through the arguments. I was much more convinced of this late in the book than I was when I first started it. We had to figure out not just the time frame that these voters need to be engaged all the time from early on, not as a last minute desperate plea that feels it's only a reinforcement to them that politics is terrible if they only hear from you with 3 days to go. It's like, well, you didn't care about me until you were desperate for a vote. Why should I care? This is why I think not only is it that we should always be worrying about engaging voters, but often it's who is doing that engagement. And so every one of your listeners, I would say to them, the best place to engage the voters of your community may be the food bank that serves some food every week. Or maybe for some, it will be the homeless shelter that's giving them, a shelter over their head temporarily, and says to them, oh, by the way, are you registered to vote? Most of them probably aren't. Or a rec center that their kids go to. And so one thing I'd say to people listening, whether you're a mayor or a volunteer at a food bank or whatever, think about any institution that is serving people that we know have been disengaged, and figure out, and the answer will almost always be yes. So not can they use their footprint of serving these people to re-engage them, but how can they?
Right.
So a health clinic, and there are a lot, a public health clinic serving low-income folks, add to your intake form, after everything else, are you registered to vote? Part of helping them health-wise is to get them into our democracy, right? So I think that we have to rethink, of course, knock on the door late, but that's not going to do it for most folks. If other organizations have been engaging those people throughout, so they're now registered, someone they trusted engaged them, then that knock on the door may be a useful reminder to vote, but someone else also got them back in the game. The other place I'd say this is, one other way to do this besides nonprofits, community-based organizations, the biggest underutilized tool in Democratic Party politics are precinct-level organizing. Right. In Ohio, we call them precincts. Other places are districts. It's the person that's in charge of a precinct of 500 people. What I put in the book is, if everyone owned their precinct and thought myself, hey, every voter in my precinct I am going to connect with. I am going to set up a structure, whether it's every street has a captain, every apartment building has a captain, and we're going to engage those voters the entire 2 years, let's say, in between the even year races. Again, so that the knock on the door at the end is the last of many, many conversations.
It's a reminder.
As opposed to what it is now, which is the only conversation. So whether it's that you decide you're going to own that precinct you live in and help organize it, or you're going to own the apartment building you live in and make sure everyone in the apartment building is registered. We're just not doing that work right now. And here's another, and you'll know this, at the end of a campaign, when you're knocking on doors, you often will look down your list and you'll see a huge building and you'll see, well, they're not on my list. Right. Because we're skipping over anyone but the most regular voters. We have, and those are the ones who are disengaged, and we reaffirm the disengagement when we not walk past that door. So the book goes through all these ways that all of us, by being a little creative, but usually using footprints that we already have, like we're on the board of that homeless shelter or we're a volunteer food bank, use that footprint you already have in life to figure out how all these institutions could engage. One other area where this is a huge opportunity. Every Democratic mayor of a city in this country should be doing everything I just described. Every public-facing part of a city hall, rec centers, health clinics, libraries, should be engaging every resident who comes through those doors. These are the very people being purged by these statehouses. So if you're the mayor, you should be pissed about that, because they're attacking your citizens, and you have every right to use your public footprint to get these people re-engaged, whether it's getting them on an early vote sheet so they get the early vote ballot, whether it's showing them how to get a voter ID they now need, they never needed before, or whether it's registering. And so if you know a mayor or a council member, ask them the next time you see them, are you registering voters at City Hall and at rec centers and health clinics? And if you're not, why not? Because we got to get started on that. So there's so many ways to engage voters. And most of the time, you'll see that we just don't do this work. So they attack our voters 24/7. And we much too rarely are fighting back on behalf of voters in all the ways that we could.
And let's talk about that. That's a great place to segue into talking about those attacks and our defense of them. Reports came out this weekend that the DNC and the Biden White House have actually specifically told elected members of the party not to comment about the indictment of Donald Trump and other issues. One of my constant frustrations that I mentioned on the show, especially with the Democratic Party and the apparatus, if you will, is their dismissal of what they derisively seem to call culture war issues, right? You and I both live in red states and see the damage these attacks are causing. I just mentioned here in Missouri, Governor Parson signed 2 bills very triumphantly this week, banning gender-affirming care essentially for kids and transgender sports participation for specifically only for transgender women. So why do you suppose so few of the Democratic leaders and our fellow pro-democracy advocates, for example, see the danger in these movements, these attacks, as you mentioned, they're attacking our voters here. I mean, what's your take? I mean, why do they not see the danger? Is it resources? Is it a lack of understanding of what we're facing in these states? Is it what's your
well, sometimes so I go through this in the book. The thing to always remember is the reason they're attacking democracy, the reason they gerrymander, the reason they're moving that threshold in Ohio or trying to 60% the amendment Constitution.
Yeah.
They know that they are the ones in the minority on almost every issue.
Right.
Abortion bans, no exceptions, is something that 10% or fewer of Ohioans agree with.
Wow.
That's their policy view. So never forget that, because sometimes this advice, get off the culture war issues and move to something people are really talking about, actually, they're the ones who support an issue that only 10% of Ohioans agree with. Right. Don't let them off the hook. Run it to ground. Take it to its most logical extreme. Who did that very well, as much as it was a challenging election for him? John Fetterman.
Yep.
He never stopped talking about the abortion issue in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And even in debate where he obviously was challenged as part of his recovery, he won the debate the minute that Mehmet Oz said abortion should come down to a woman, her doctor, and the local elected official. That was it.
Yep.
That was the end of the race.
Yep.
And so sometimes when they are on extreme ground, pivoting it away, you are letting them off the hook.
Right.
There's a reason Mitch McConnell told Lindsey Graham not to talk about a national abortion ban.
Right.
There's a reason Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, who spent his career trying to make everything as pro-life as possible, scrubbed his entire website of references to that all last fall. They are generally in the minority, and they know it. Yep. And their main goal is to distract from that all the time. Other times, I'd say you got to reframe it. In a tougher area in particular, the minute you take the whole battle over gender and make it about book banning and about the freedom we all have as parents to educate our kids, and no angry parent down the street is going to tell me what my kids get to check out of the library, you are now with 70% of Americans.
Right.
So I think being smart about framing is important, but the instinct to just jump back to the issues folks are really talking about, sometimes they're talking about the very issue that the right is talking about, and they're pissed about it. And if you move on, you're actually giving a gift. And the other thing I'd say, though, is at the same time, sometimes they play games to bait us.
Yeah.
And you should always respond. I mean, one of the messaging gurus that I know that was on the Midas show a few years ago is Anat Shankar-Osorio. And one of the things that going back to your point, the idea that you're just going to move away from a topic as if they're not going to keep talking about it,
right,
is insane. Like when they do one of their dog whistle type racist attacks, her point, this messaging guru that I really respect, is if all you do is say, well, we're going to talk about something else instead, their attack will sink in.
Yep.
You're better off confronting it and saying the reason they're running this dog whistle is to divide us up so they can accomplish, lower wages or something. So you should take it on. And this is happening, I'm afraid, with and I did a whiteboard the other day on this. Every Republican is using the same message about the indictment. The facts are so bad. Right. So bad. I mean, showers and toilets, and not to get too much. When I was a kid, we had Archie comic books in our toilets. He's surrounded by classified intel. Yeah. Everyone in the bathroom, that's their reading material. That's like nuts. Flying it up to New Jersey, moving boxes around. It's like a bad comedy. They don't want to talk about that. So what do? They say, oh, he's being treated differently than other people. That's the total talking point. Yep. If we don't respond in some way, that talking point will set in. We know it. Yep. So I did a whiteboard the other day, two minutes. Now everyone else has to figure out the best way to do this, and said, that's the most absurd argument. I will concede that there are two systems of justice. If you can show me any other case where someone was moving boxes around and lying about it, was storing them in a shower, in a bathroom, and toilets, and admittedly, publicly said he knew he had declassified them. If you can show me any case where those facts are true and the person was indicted, then I would agree with you. There's a problem here. There's no such case.
Nope.
Everyone who would do something like this would be indicted. And the reason I did that is because if we don't get into the ether what the counter argument is, they will dominate the space. So I do think you got to sometimes reframe it. But if you simply duck and think they're going to stop talking about whatever the topic is because you're not talking about it, you're going to lose. But the other thing I would say is, even when you do that, still, if your message like Gretchen Whitmer's was fix the damn roads, or your message like Laura Kelly's was Sam Brownback has destroyed our public schools, so will what's his name, Kobach.
Yep.
Don't lose sight of your winning message either. And your winning message, it may be abortion like it was for Fetterman, but it may be that in Kansas they destroyed public schools. And so don't feel like you got to stick with it the rest of the way,
right?
Because you might have a killer message that's going to win you the election, and that takes some discipline. But Gretchen Whitmer never stopped saying "fix the damn roads," as much as I'm sure she was also addressing those other attacks.
Well, it's a
balancing act, and it takes judgment in the heart of a campaign. But don't pivot automatically because you may be on winning ground already.
Yeah. But
also, if you've got a killer message on public outcomes that are horrifying to people, don't move off that topic either.
Well, it's parry and attack. I mean, it's parry and attack.
Exactly.
It's just like us. You don't just sit on defense. Once you've been attacked, you defend and then you counterattack. It's the same. It's the same thing. And
right.
My frustration is they're like, well, we'll just ignore the attack and just do this attack over here. And I think one of the I'll never have James Carville on the show, but the old canard of it's the economy stupid was one of the dumbest things. I think that's poisoned so much of our side. We've got to go back to the economy. Okay, it was the economy stupid in that race. Okay. Things have changed since then. Every time I've actually had people say it to me since then in races I've been part of, like, well, it's about the economy, Fred. It's economy stupid. Like, holy shit, dude. Okay, like that was that race. Every race is different. By the way, every campaign's different. Every location's different. It may not actually just be the economy right now. It may be other things. So
in 22, it was abortion bans.
Right.
I mean, those inform even the Secretary of State races. And one of the great results of 22 was that election deniers lost Secretary of State races in every single swing state. Everyone, which was incredible running the table.
Yeah.
And even there, if you look closely at the ads that were run, Dobbs and abortion bans became a perfect sort of example of what starts to happen when you lose your democracy.
Right.
And so those extremist candidates also being tied into the Dobbs outcome, which was so horrifying to people, really changed outcomes. So yeah, I agree. It may be the economy sometimes, but in that case, the people who ran with the very tough on abortion ban message, Fetterman, Whitmer did the same thing. She never stopped talking about it. They actually did very well. People who pivoted too quickly back to other things actually blew an opportunity to really hold their opponent out as an extremist when it came to an issue that so many people were voting on. By the way, the other thing, and I think you'll agree with this, messaging these days is as much about firing up your own base as to show up, going back to our show up argument. If you milk toast every message to avoid these topics, you're not giving anyone a reason to show up.
There you go.
And so they hear the moderate message where you split everything in the middle, that you didn't say abortion was at stake or your right to choose your own reproductive freedom. And so they think, well, I never heard that, so it wasn't as meaningful to me. And your milquetoast message did nothing for me. So if so much of these elections are coming down to whose base shows up. The Republicans are very good at this with caravans and scare tactics. All we have to do is talk about the truth, like they want to ban it, as they do in all these states. But if you don't talk about it because you think it's too polarizing, you literally hurt your own turnout and then you lose.
Well, that's it. That's that back to the disengaged voters, and I'll let you go. It is exactly that. We've got to fire them up, and we've got to show teeth. We have to fight, right? And that's what I hear. I hear that constantly. And our opponents are fighting that way. When I was canvassing for a campaign in Georgia against Marjorie Taylor Greene, I remember came up to a lady and she said, "Well, who are you with?" I said, her opponent, and she's like, "Oh, well, Margie's my girl." Like, okay, why? Well, she fights. She's a fighter, And look, I hate that message. I do. I hate that message. But people on our side want that too, right? I mean, I mean, really Democrat people watch this show. I know because they send me messages. They want to fight. They want to know how to fight. They want to be in the fight, and they want to know that we're fighting for them. They don't want bureaucrats. They don't want you. You're not running for bureaucracy. You're running for leadership. You're running for changing the direction of our country. And I do think that's a message I say to a lot of my Democratic colleagues is you got to fight, bro. Show some teeth, show some muscle, get in there, because that's what you're up against. You don't have to do the same way they do, but you do have to address these issues and show them. I also think Fetterman, for all of his challenges, he's a tough as nails fighter. That's his thing. Whitmer is a fighter. Whitmer had effing death threats against her. What she did, she showed up. So
you know what also happens though when you don't fight? And I have a whole chapter in this book on messaging.
Yeah.
If you're saying democracy is under attack, but then you don't look like you're fighting, right? People will think, well, it must not be that bad because you're not fighting for it. I believe democracy is under attack. Yes. You do too. That's why you and I get a little animated sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why we never stop talking. That's why I call my book Saving Democracy and your show is called On Democracy. And in the way we engage, we look like we mean it.
Yeah.
If you're in a state house somewhere and you're super polite about it and you let people filibuster without having to stand there for days, which is what I would do, you actually you're undermining your own message. And not only do your own supporters think, well, you're not really a fighter, but all the less political people who are trying to figure out, is democracy really under attack or isn't it? If you don't look like you're really fighting for it, they must think, hey, it must not be, because those people aren't acting like it's under attack. They're acting calm. They're acting like everything's okay. Yep. And so it's a very inconsistent message than what happened when who was fighting for democracy? They woke up the country, the two Justins, and Mallory McMorrow. Yep. When you saw them, you thought there is a fight. The democracy is under attack, and they're acting like it is. And sometimes I worry when we watch our federal officials of the U.S. Senate, the debates feel like, well, except for a few exceptions like a White House out of Rhode Island or a Bishop Warnock, it doesn't look like they really think there's a threat because everything's still a little too civil. We allow the filibuster to play the role it does without. My attitude would be, Grassley or whoever, if you want to filibuster our voting rights bill, you're doing it for days. Yep. And when you go to the bathroom, we're calling the roll because you are attacking democracy. You fought like that. People would think, oh, this must be real. They're acting like it's real. So I think it's a very inconsistent message we send, not only to our own voters, but people are just trying to figure out who's right and who's not.
Well, it's norms and traditions. It's a constant refrain I use a lot. Is everyone wants norms and traditions. It's the bane of the old guard of our own party who failed to see the change in reality. Right. So we just have to have norms and traditions. Like, no, your norms and traditions are trash because the opponent is not honoring them. So you keep pretending they exist and they don't exist, right? Mm-hmm. It is in many ways, we could almost circle back to what happened to Chris Light at CNN. He has this ephemeral view that everyone wants neutral. No, actually they don't, not anymore, because that shit's gone. That day is gone. Right. Well, look, we can bemoan that and we can cry and wail and gnash our teeth. I just want norms and traditions. Look, that shit ended the day that Tubby came down the freaking golden escalator, right? When Trump injected himself into our political system, norms and traditions went out the window. Now we're at war, and the realization is you have to fight. What's his name? Rumsfeld. Well, you have to go to the war with the army built. You know what? Guess what? We've been at war for a while. Adjust. It's too late, and now so I get very frustrated. Look, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate. I know you got a lot going on. You're traveling the country, and you got a book to sell. We'll put the link out to the book. We'll put the graphic on. I appreciate you. This is freaking fantastic. I love the work we're doing. I'm excited about working with you on Forgotten Democrats. I'm going to tell our viewers about Forgotten Democrats here in a second, but it's exciting stuff you're doing. I appreciate you being in the fight, brother.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and if anyone, I'm at David Pepper on Twitter.
There you go.
I have a newsletter I have now under Substack, but my main goal here is to say to people, you're on the front line of democracy. There is so much you can do about it. And the book tries to help guide people on specifically the very specific things they can do going forward. So I appreciate your help in getting the word out. And I love the work we're doing together as well.
I appreciate it, man. Again, get that book and keep up the good fight, brother.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Take care.
Man, what a great conversation. David is genius. If you don't follow him on Twitter, I recommend it highly. Catch his whiteboard videos and the work he's doing with Blue Ohio. We'll throw those links up later. I'm excited to let you know what he was hinting. We were hinting a little bit what we're doing. I'm not going to like hide the football on you. So I am thrilled to be joining a new organization, or actually relaunching an organization called Forgotten Democrats. I'll be serving as the national chairman for Forgotten Democrats. This is the idea of building a community of like-minded Americans who want to see us run and fight everywhere. As I mentioned in the show, 149 Republicans ran for Congress, essentially unopposed last cycle. You may remember we had Dr. Chris Jones, who ran against Sarah Huckabee in Arkansas a few months ago. Chris told us during our show that all 4 congressional seats in Arkansas were essentially unopposed. 2 with no opponent, 2 the opponent never even raised $200,000, the basic amount of money you need to run a decent congressional campaign. That is unacceptable. An entire state didn't have a choice in their congressional races. The Forgotten Democrats campaign is meant to help that. It's a fascinating model run by my friends at It Starts Today, Every State Blue. The idea that we will bottom-up fund candidates. You join a monthly subscription, you become a part of our community. We'll have Zooms, we'll have opportunities for you. You'll hear from people like David Maverick. He's going to be joining me on that Zoom on June 29th, where he can tell you a little about what you can do locally to make a difference. And then people can help each other. And then candidates, 75% of the money that we raise will go to actual candidates. I'm talking about directly to candidates through a remarkable FEC filing that allows us to break up your payment among multiple candidates, not just the top guys. In other words, candidates who really actually need a little bit of money and do a lot with it will get that funding. Another 25% will go towards helping them win, mentoring, shared services, helping them be a more efficient, effective, and a coordinated campaign. So I'm very excited to be launching Forgotten Democrats here in a couple of weeks. There's a really easy way to find out more information. If you want to do it, I'd love you to do it. It's so simple. You simply text Fred to 33777. Go on your phone, dial up 33777, text the word Fred. It'll walk you through how to sign up for our email list. You'll get announcements about what's coming. I'm not going to bug you for money. We're not like that. We're going to tell stories. I love this partnership. I love the organization. I love to work with my friend David Pepper, my friend Jess Piper here in Missouri, and the folks at Every State Blue. I think you're going to love it. So again, that's text Fred to 33777. You can learn about our upcoming launch and the work we're going to be doing. I'd love to have you guys join. People ask me all the time, what can we do, Fred? And I really like the organization Forgotten Democrats because we're going to do something for a change. So it's a great show. You can, as always, you can join our growing Substack community. It's fpwellman.substack.com. I got some cool stuff we're doing for subscribers now. We had our first private Zoom. Just a few people joined. We had a great time talking stories, telling stories about my background and the topics of the day. While we were on our Zoom the other day for the Substack community is when the indictment came down right in the middle of it. One of my friends and followers told me about it just as we were on TV, on the Zoom. You can always find me at FP Wellman. You can find me on Instagram at FP Wellman Official. All the show feeds are on Democracy Pod. We have great sponsors. Again, we're on the Midas Touch Network. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, everywhere you go. I mention it a lot now, but I'd love you to do a review or just a share with your friends and family so we have more people watch the show. It matters to me and it matters to the algorithm that you like our show, and we'll spend some time with us and share it with your friends. In the meantime, the fight for our democracy continues. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you being part of our community. I look forward to hearing from you. Let's see you again next week here on Democracy with FP Wellman.